So let's talk about the American Revolution, and let's share the contradictory message with regards to slavery and race. So while the majority of Africans are enslaved, free blacks in the colonies faced increasing segregation despite being allowed to form their own communities. So it was obvious to many when we take a look at the American Revolution that not all men were created equal. So the abolitionist movement is important for us to remember. The abolitionist movement in U.S. history is important because it reveals a commitment to fight for civil rights. It reveals a commitment to fight for human rights, both black people and white people who are involved in abolitionism. Now, I'd like to concentrate on the abolitionist movement prior to and during the American Revolutionary War. There was both white and black opposition to slavery. Now, white opposition to slavery prior to the Revolution was few in number. One could say that prior to the revolt, the abolitionist movement was a Quaker movement. So the Quaker religion here is very important. During the Revolution and thereafter, between 1770 and 1790, many groups formed arguing for slavery's abolishment. And causes for the rise of white abolitionism can be traced to religion, and most importantly, the revivalist tradition of everyone being equal before the eyes of God. And that then can be traced to the revolutionary ideas themselves, the fight for liberty. So, the fight against political oppression. So the connection with black slavery becomes clear. The revolution should include the abolitionists, should include abolition. When we take a look at the South, when we take a look at the leaders of the American Revolution, the South is being hypocritical. Let's go to a film clip that helps us appreciate this dimension of the Quaker religion.
We often think about the abolition movement beginning in the 1830s with the really famous abolitionists like William Lloyd Garrison, Frederick Douglass. But really it goes all the way back to the colonial era. Of course, the first people to resist slavery are the enslaved Africans themselves. But in terms of white critics, the earliest ones are almost always Quakers. And it's really in the 1750s when the Quakers kind of really as a society, the Society of Friends, turn against slavery, and that's largely due to the actions of two men, John Woolman of New Jersey and Anthony Benezet of Pennsylvania. And between 1755, beginning then, the leaders of the Quakers begin to pass a series of resolutions saying the Quakers can no longer own slaves. And by 1776, most Quakers in America have accepted these rules and they've ended slavery within the society. Beginning with the American Revolution, this opens up a new opportunity for Quakers to move their anti-slavery beyond their own religious group to American society as a whole. And they begin petitioning the Confederation Congress in 1783. And they petition them pretty much nonstop.
Okay, so I agree with Professor Nicholas Wood, because I like to concentrate on the abolitionist movement prior to and during the American Revolutionary struggle, because most often everybody talks about the abolitionist movement in the 1830s. But really, the abolitionist movement begins during the Revolutionary period, and as Professor Wood was saying right before, again, the causes for the rise of white abolitionism can be traced to religion and the revivalist tradition of everyone being equal before the eyes of God. Now, black opposition was continuous throughout slavery. So the black spirituals, when you take a look at the black spirituals, they are based on the yearning for freedom, on the search for justice. In the North, opposition is going to take formal political steps using the language of the Revolution. Free blacks are going to petition state legislatures to abolish slavery. So black opposition also consisted of participation in the military on both sides of the conflict. And the British Army made the most extensive efforts to raise troops in the colonies. And the most radical appeal was Lord Dunmore's proclamation, which offered freedom to blacks if they joined the British Army. However, Britain did not grant freedom to all. They were unequally treated in the military, and they were forced to do manual labor. So when England lost to the United States, some ended up in Nova Scotia, creating a free black community. Others journeyed to West Africa and created a British colony called Sierra Leone. Now, the American army itself resisted black enlistment at first, but as the war dragged on, the North recruited heavily, the Upper South some, and the Lower South not at all. In all, about the same number of blacks enlisted on both sides of the conflict, and sometimes slave owners sent their slaves to fight in their place. However, blacks were relegated to the worst duties. Some did arm bears, is it bear arms? For the majority, the military was an avenue to freedom and an opportunity to travel. Now, back on the plantation, slaves took advantage of increased opportunities during the war for rebellion against and escape from the master, particularly in the Lower South, where the Lower South became the front in the latter half of the war. Slaves entertained guerrilla warfare and economic disruptions. And when the war front moved to the South, many whites left the plantations. About 1/3 of the white population left South Carolina. And throughout the war, there were scattered instances of rebellion, insolence, stealing, rumors of slave plots, insurrection. So many times the militia in the South policed slaves from the fear of insurrection.